Hi everyone, welcome back to this new episode of Raising the Bar. I'm Shaynna.
I'm Tia.
And I'm Emilia.
And today we're going to be discussing the recent killing of Charlie Kirk. So Charlie Kirk is a political activist. He's right-wing and he is the head of an organization called Turning Point USA. And last week he was tragically shot and killed.
Yeah, he was a prominent U.S. conservative activist and was indeed co-founder of Turning Point USA. And he was also a very prominent media figure and speaker as he went around many college campuses such as Cambridge or Oxford or many in the U.S. and would get debated by many college students about varying subjects and topics, which would be very controversial, such as abortion and gun rights, amongst many others.
On September 10th, 2025, at Utah Valley University, he was fatally shot in the neck whilst he was on stage debating with students. 3,000 people were present, and the suspect was identified as a 22-year-old called Tyler Robinson, who was said to have grown up in a Republican household.
Even though some may say that Charlie Kirk had very controversial political views, as he was quite conservative, whatever someone may think about Kirk's political views, it's important to step back and look at what this event actually represents. Political violence. Violence directed at people because of their public positions, beliefs, or activism is extremely dangerous for democracy. It creates fear, discourage open debate, and makes communities feel simply less safe.
I also believe that Charlie Kirk's shooting is an example of the growing political violence all around the world. This can even be linked to the January 6th Capitol riots and the violence there, and also the recent violence in Nepal with Parliament being burnt down and members of Parliament being lit on fire. And we could also think back to the UK and the EDL riots that took place last summer in 2024, and also the anti-immigration riots both in the UK and Australia.
I think these recent events also highlight the U.S. Constitution and its many components, such as the Second Amendment. The U.S. Constitution was written wanting to highlight personal freedoms, such as freedom of speech, like the right to bear arms, as seen as the Second Amendment, right to a fair trial. However, over time, these freedoms have sometimes been abused by the American public, especially towards the Second Amendment. And I think even Charlie Kirk, who was a far-right conservative, very much advocated for the Second Amendment, and even himself said that he was willing to sacrifice and have some sacrificial deaths every year as long as he got to keep his Second Amendment. So I think this whole his assassination sheds light on the fact that no one truly is safe from the Second Amendment, and that even though some Americans may see it as a constitutional right, which it is entrenched as a constitutional right, it does give food for thought that maybe there should be more gun regulations in the United States.
Also, assassinations can lead to many things. For example, Archduke Franz's assassination. His assassination in Sarajevo lit the fuse for World War I, leading to 20+ million deaths. Even though Charlie Kirk wasn't in the cabinet or wasn't a leading political figure, his death was still treated like an assassination, and it was still treated as like something that's very incredibly important. Like, all the flags in America were lowered to half-mast, and it was just like viewed as a really important event, and probably will go down in history as like one of the important like assassinations in like Republican history.
A lot of people have seen the attention for Charlie Kirk from the executive as quite controversial because recently two Democratic representatives were murdered, and the flags were not flown half-mast, and there wasn't an official White House statement like there was for Charlie Kirk. Trump has come forward and said that this was because Tim Walz didn't ask him to, so that's his perspective on that, but that has been a source of controversy. Also, when the news broke that Charlie Kirk had been assassinated, a lot of people came out assuming that it'd be someone from the opposing party, a Democrat, someone probably quite far left-wing, someone who was opposed to Charlie Kirk's views, but the suspect is actually quite on the farther side of right-wing. And the suspected shooter is also a MAGA Republican, which shocked a lot of people since Charlie Kirk was quite pro-Trump, not concerning the Epstein files, but in general he was quite pro-Trump, and Trump was also advocating for Charlie Kirk. So I think you could interpret this as Charlie Kirk's shooting isn't a matter of political differences between parties, like between Democrats and Republicans. It's not a product of the political polarization in America, but instead it's a product of political violence, not necessarily from one side against one side, but political violence in general that is growing.
Also, there was a Ukrainian refugee called Irina Zorutska who fled to the US in 2022 following the Russian invasion. On August 22nd, 2025, she was fatally stabbed on the light rail train in North Carolina. And there's so many more cases about violence in America, and I feel like this case, the Charlie Kirk case, I mean, it just shows how much violence is really growing in America and how they really need to put a stop to this.
I also read a CNN article today, and I found out that Trump has actually stated that he may classify Antifa, an anti-fascist, anti-racist, multi-organizational group, as a terrorist organization. So Antifa consists of multiple violent and non-violent organizations that are anti-fascist and anti-racist. So this is a kind of a crackdown on left-wing organizations. It's also been stated by a member of Trump's cabinet that they wish to crack down on other left-wing organizations, and a member in particular named Black Lives Matter as one of these organizations.
I think overall, despite what your political views are and how extreme they might be, it doesn't matter if you agreed or disagreed with Charlie Kirk's views. Political violence is always unacceptable. We can and should debate policies, which is exactly what he did. He was willing to be proven wrong and to debate his ideas. But that debate has to happen through words, votes, and civic action, not through weapons, and especially not through political violence. So as we reflect on this tragedy, maybe the takeaway isn't just about one individual or one political movement, but about the importance of rejecting violence in politics altogether, as the US and our democracy depends on it.
Also, I'd like to wrap up by saying political violence or violence in any case is never acceptable, especially in this case. A daughter's lost a father, a wife has lost her husband, so many people have lost someone that they knew, and that's really, really sad. And I'm opposed to Charlie Kirk's death for two reasons, because obviously it's an act of violence and no one should die like that, but also because of the use of guns that allowed him to die in that way. It allows for violence for so many people of all different ranges, like people who are in schools, people who are walking down the street, people like Charlie Kirk who came to share their opinions. The lack of regulation of guns allows for people like that to suffer, and I think that's unfair in all cases, and I think that this scenario in particular has shed a light on that.
Overall, we can see that there's a massive gun problem in America, because the same day that Charlie Kirk was shot, there was also another school shooting in Colorado. And America is really well known for its free speech, which writes in the amendments. And I feel like this gun violence really is just taking away people's rights, it's scaring people, it's having people not speak up, and it just really has to stop. And violence, whether it's with guns or it's not, is wrong and at all costs. Thank you so much for listening, and make sure to tune in for our next episode.